Is Magic the Gathering evil? In short, no, I don't think it's evil. When you look up this topic, a bunch of misinformation always comes up with Christian preachers and the same references that have been used over and over again for years, citing pentagrams, witches, and the occult. I'm here to debunk that. When the game was first introduced almost 30 years ago, there was a big scare amongst parents about how the game was evil, and it had too many satanic symbols and lore in it. And while sure, the earliest Magic cards had some terrible imagery and some demonic symbols, I don't know that Richard Garfield was really going for making something satanic. And a lot of the cards from the original set have changed their pictures to better represent what the card does. Richard Garfield was a huge fan and player of Dungeons and Dragons back in the 80s, and he wanted to pull in some of the elements from that game into card form. It's here that we got dragons, dwarves, clerics, elves, etc. That's more or less Lord of the Rings, isn't it? And do you think there's anything really inherently satanic about Lord of the Rings? Yeah, sure, maybe some of the symbolism, but even the Bible has that, you know? And if it's something you're uncomfortable with, maybe this isn't the game for you. Early cards from the game's history leaned heavily on strange and terrifying images to convey that you are casting spells or summoning monsters to do your bidding. Most nerdy or geeky things from this era kind of had that kind of feel to them. Think movies like Labyrinth, Gremlins, and even Batman Returns. This kind of nerdy stuff wouldn't truly hit mainstream markets until the release of Iron Man in the mid-2000s. And that's kind of when pop culture really became the norm. Magic the Gathering has had a lot of strides in these areas that make the game far less weird than it was back then. And namely, that's because of a bigger budget. More money meant that Wizards of the Coast, the people who make Magic, could easily hire great artists to do work for them. We went from this, to this, and then to this. This change of imagery has really helped the game become what it is today. And in my humble opinion, newer arts portray the game better, far better than the old art ever did. And while old cards focused on the strange, bizarre nature of wizards and monsters and spells, newer cards rely on storytelling and characters and expression, even though the magic is still the biggest part of the game, casting spells, summoning creatures, and defeating your opponent. To put this next part in context, I need to explain something really fast. Each year, a few new sets come out that have different planes or worlds that host the Magic the Gathering story. A couple years ago, they did the Greek mythology set, Theros, and around that same time, they also did a whole set based on fairy tales, Throne of Eldraine. Now let's look at some of the cards from more recent Magic sets. We got Pollywog Symbiote, Alpine Watchdog, and Bamboo Grove Archer. Not as much ugly imagery here. In fact, I'd say they're beautiful. It now relies on the card set's story and lore to show off what a certain world has to offer. Now, with that being said, let's immediately get into some sets that may not be for kids. This set, Innistrad Midnight Hunt, is one such set. It just came out. The game has visited the world of Innistrad 3 times now, and it's one of the most popular worlds Magic players love. And maybe it's due to its grittier nature and its focus around zombies and werewolves and vampires. It has cards like Curse of Surveillance, Eldritch Evolution, Murder, or Flesh Taker. Yes, these are pretty terrifying, and yes, the game is marked 13+ for a reason. But not all new sets are like this, as I pointed out earlier, with Greek gods and cool Japanese folklore and just fairy tales in general. So don't use this set as a reference to criticize the game, because not every set is like this. And as a parent or guardian, if you don't like that kind of stuff, you can easily avoid it by just skipping that whole set and moving on to the next set, or getting a previous set that, you know, just doesn't have as much scary imagery. There are over like 20,000 cards in the game, so it's really easy to find the cards that you like. And honestly, parents and guardians, this is no worse than things teens watch now anyway. Like all the violence in action movies, the blatant killing in games like Fortnite or Battlefield, and all the horror films that everyone seems to love, which, might I add, are much, much worse. Now, moving on to the pentagram color wheel section. This is one of the most controversial things that existed back then, and it still exists now because the card back hasn't changed in the entire history of Magic. The card back portrays what some call a pentagram, or a demonic symbol. The path to evil. But in actuality, it just shows the 5 different colors of the game, or the color pie. Different types of cards that you play have different types of mana, or resources that they use. These spells can only be cast if you have resources of that certain type. You can only play red cards if you have red mana, green spells if you have green mana, and so on and so forth. These colors interact with each other in different ways. It's much more complicated than this, but I'll be brief on the explanation. For example, white is next to green and blue on the color pie. It synergizes with those colors in a way that black and red don't. In the same way that red synergizes with black and green more than white and blue. And this pattern follows all the colors around the circle. Each color represents its own type of magic, right? Taking all this into context, you can see that the pentagon on the back of the card basically just represents the magic's system in the game, and that's about it. There's nothing satanic about it. In conclusion, I do not think Magic the Gathering is evil. In fact, it's an incredibly fun game that brings in strategy, imagination, and even a hint of math. It can really teach someone how to plan their next move, build a deck that works on synergies, and ultimately help you make friends. It's kind of like chess in a way, with strategizing and planning ahead and trying to beat your opponent at the game. It gets teens off their screens and gets them thinking. Their imaginations will run rampant with new possibilities and approaches to deck building, and I know this from personal experience because I've spent hours upon hours doing this kind of stuff. And yes, I have made a lot of friends through Magic the Gathering, and I hope to make more, and that's kind of what this channel is about, making new friends and just being there for the people who want to play and being able to have a good time with each other. Thank you for watching. Like this video and share with your family and friends and show them how non-evil Magic the Gathering is. And if you like the channel, be sure to subscribe and follow. This way you'll be able to catch me every single Thursday for your weekly dose of magic. To support this channel, visit the TCGplayer affiliate link in the description below. And if you want to support the channel directly, visit patreon.com/ManfredPlusMagic. As a patron, you'll have access to the community Discord where you can talk with myself and other friends about all things magic. And you'll find even more benefits for each tier, starting at $1 as a copper. Well, I think that was good. I don't know.